You are born inside a rotting log, buried deep beneath the forest floor. It's dark, damp, and cramped. You're not alone. Dozens of your siblings are packed in around you, all of them white, grub-like, and hungry. Your mother never bothered to stick around. She laid her eggs months ago, found the perfect decaying wood, and moved on with her life. You'll never see her, never know her, and honestly, she probably wouldn't recognize you anyway. The world around you is nothing but decomposing timber and organic matter. It smells like death, but to you, it smells like dinner. Your body is soft, segmented, and built for one thing: eating. You don't have legs yet, just stubby appendages that help you crawl through the rotting mess. Your head is oversized compared to the rest of you, equipped with powerful mandibles designed to tear through wood fiber like it's cotton candy. You start eating immediately. There's no time to waste, no moment to pause and figure things out. The wood around you is your universe, and every bite makes you bigger. You chew through cellulose, breaking it down with enzymes in your gut. It's not glamorous, but it works. Some of your siblings are faster eaters than others. They grow quicker, take up more space, and crowd out the weaker ones. You learn early that being slow means being left behind. The log you're living in is massive, at least from your perspective. It stretches in every direction, offering endless tunnels and chambers to explore. You carve your own pathways, following the grain of the wood, always searching for the softest, most nutritious sections. Sometimes you bump into a sibling who's carved their own tunnel nearby. There's no family reunion, no friendly greeting. You just keep eating and move in a different direction. As weeks pass, you notice changes in your body. Your skin feels tight, like it's shrinking around you. The pressure builds until it becomes unbearable. Then one day, it splits. You push and wiggle, forcing yourself out of the old skin like taking off a jacket that's too small. Underneath is a fresh layer, slightly bigger than before. This is your first molt, but it won't be your last. The newly molted skin is soft and vulnerable. For a few hours, you're defenseless. If a predator found you now, you'd be an easy meal, but you're deep underground, protected by layers of rotting wood and soil. You wait for the new exoskeleton to harden, then get back to the only job that matters: eating. Months go by. You molt again, then again. Each time, you emerge bigger and stronger. Your mandibles grow more powerful, capable of chewing through tougher wood. Your body stretches longer, taking up more space in the log. The tunnels you carved when you were smaller now feel cramped, so you expand them, always making room for your growing frame. Food isn't always abundant. Sometimes you hit a section of wood that's too hard, too dry, or already stripped clean by your siblings. When that happens, you have to dig deeper, work harder, and sometimes go hungry. Hunger makes you desperate, and desperate grubs do desperate things. You've learned to eat the fungus that grows on the wood, the bacteria that breaks down the cellulose, even the waste left behind by other insects. Nothing is off limits when you're starving. Winter arrives, though you don't really understand what that means yet. The temperature drops, and everything slows down. Your metabolism shifts into low gear. You eat less, move less, and spend most of your time curled up in a small chamber you've carved out for yourself. It's like hibernation, but not quite. You're still alive, still growing, just at a much slower pace. During this quiet time, you molt once more. This molt is different, more significant. When you emerge, your body has changed in ways you don't fully comprehend yet. Wing buds have appeared on your back, small and useless for now, but they are there. Your legs are longer, stronger. Your head has grown even larger, and your mandibles are now truly impressive weapons. Spring returns, and with it comes renewed energy. You're hungrier than ever, and the wood around you seems insufficient now. You need more space, more food, more everything. You start digging upward, toward the surface, following instincts you didn't know you had. The soil above the log is softer, easier to move through. You create a vertical tunnel, your first real connection to the world above. But you're not ready to leave yet. You return to the log, back to the familiar world of rotting wood and endless eating. You've grown massive now, at least compared to when you started. Some of your siblings didn't make it this far. You found their dried up remains in abandoned tunnels, victims of disease, starvation, or simply bad luck. You didn't mourn them. You ate around them and kept going. Your appetite has become enormous. You can strip entire sections of wood clean in a matter of days. The log that once seemed infinite now feels limiting. You've eaten so much of it that the structure is starting to collapse in places. Other insects have moved in, beetles, ants, and creatures you can't identify. Some are competitors for the same food. Others see you as food. A centipede finds its way into one of your tunnels. It's fast, aggressive, and armed with venomous fangs. For a moment, you consider retreating. You've spent your entire life avoiding confrontation, focusing only on eating and growing. But something has changed. You're bigger now, stronger. Your mandibles aren't just tools for chewing wood anymore. They're weapons. The centipede strikes first, lunging at your head with surprising speed. You react instinctively, catching it between your mandibles before it can sink its fangs into you. It writhes and twists, trying to break free, but your grip is too strong. You bite down harder, and the centipede goes still. You've just killed for the first time, and it feels strangely satisfying. You don't eat the centipede. Its taste is bitter and unpleasant. But you don't forget the lesson either. You're not just a passive wood eater anymore. You're a predator when you need to be. This realization changes how you move through the tunnels. You're more confident, more assertive. When you encounter other insects, they're the ones who retreat. As your second year underground begins, you start preparing for something you don't fully understand yet. The urge to dig becomes overwhelming. You create a large chamber deep in the log, bigger than any space you've carved before. You line the walls with chewed wood pulp, creating a smooth, protective shell around yourself. This isn't just another hiding spot. It's a cocoon. Inside this chamber, your body begins the most dramatic transformation of your life. Your skin splits one final time, but what emerges isn't just a bigger version of what you were before. Your limbs elongate and strengthen. Wings develop from the small buds on your back, folding neatly against your body. Your exoskeleton hardens into armor-like plates. Your color changes from pale white to deep black with hints of brown and gold. The process takes weeks. During this time, you're completely vulnerable, unable to move or defend yourself. You survive on stored body fat, trusting that the chamber you built will protect you from predators and environmental threats. It's the longest period of inactivity in your life, and every day feels like a gamble. Then one morning, it's over. You push against the walls of your chamber, and they give way easily. You crawl through the opening and into the tunnel system you know so well. But everything looks different now. The passageways that once felt spacious now seem cramped. You can barely fit through openings that used to be highways. You make your way to the vertical tunnel you dug months ago. It leads upward toward a world you've never seen, but somehow know you must reach. You climb slowly, your new body still unfamiliar and awkward. The soil above grows lighter in color as you ascend. Strange smells drift down from above, fresh air, plant life, and something else you can't identify. Your powerful legs dig into the tunnel walls, propelling you upward inch by inch. Your mandibles, now enormous and intimidating, clear away obstacles. You're no longer the helpless grub who spent years eating rotting wood. You're something else entirely, something built for a different kind of life. The tunnel above you grows brighter. You can sense an opening, a barrier between your underground world and whatever lies beyond. Your instincts tell you to break through, to emerge into the light. But part of you hesitates. The underground world is all you've ever known. It's safe, predictable, familiar. You pause just below the surface, your massive form filling the narrow tunnel. Above you lies the unknown, a world of dangers and opportunities you can't even imagine. Below you lies the security of the underground, but also the limitations that come with it. You've outgrown that world. Your body is telling you it's time to leave. You push upward one final time. The soil above gives way, and suddenly you're breaking through into something completely new. Light streams down into the tunnel, not the dim bioluminescence you've occasionally glimpsed from fungus, but real light from above. It's harsh and bright, forcing you to close your eyes. You feel air moving across your body, carrying scents that make your antennae twitch with excitement. There are sounds too, rustling, chirping, buzzing. The underground world was mostly silent except for your own movement and the occasional creaks of settling wood. This new world is alive with noise. Your head emerges fully from the tunnel. You're now experiencing the surface world for the first time, though your eyes are still adjusting to the brightness. The ground around you is covered with something soft and green. Grass, though you don't know to call it that yet. Above you stretches an endless blue expanse that seems impossibly vast. You pull yourself completely out of the tunnel, your massive body finally free from the confines of the underground. You stand on 6 powerful legs, each one perfectly designed for gripping and climbing. Your wings remain folded against your back. You haven't figured out how to use them yet, but you can feel their presence. The transformation is complete. You're no longer a grub living in rotting wood. You're a Hercules beetle, one of the strongest creatures on Earth relative to your size. Your horn, which developed during your time in the cocoon, curves forward from your head like a medieval weapon. Your exoskeleton gleams in the sunlight, a masterpiece of natural engineering. But being powerful doesn't mean being prepared. This surface world operates by different rules than the underground realm you've known. The dangers here are new and unfamiliar. The food sources are different. Even the basic act of movement requires learning new skills. You take your first steps on the surface, your legs adapting to the uneven terrain. Each step is deliberate and careful. You're built like a tank, but you move with the caution of someone who knows they're in foreign territory. The grass beneath your feet bends and springs back, creating an unstable surface unlike the solid wood and soil you're used to. A shadow passes overhead, and your instincts scream danger. You freeze, pressing your body low against the ground. Above you, something large moves through the air, a bird. It doesn't see you, continuing on its path without pausing. But the encounter reminds you that this new world is full of predators you've never had to consider before. You're no longer hidden safely underground. You're exposed, visible, and despite your impressive size and strength, you're still learning how to survive in this strange new environment. The real adventure is just beginning. You spend your first hours on the surface, trying to figure out how anything works up here. The ground isn't solid like the wood you're used to. It shifts and moves under your weight. Grass blades bend when you step on them, creating an unsteady platform that makes walking feel like balancing on rope. Your 6 legs are powerful, but they're designed for gripping solid surfaces, not navigating this springy carpet of vegetation. The light is overwhelming. Underground, darkness was your constant companion, broken only by the occasional glow of decomposing matter. Now you're bombarded with brightness that seems to come from everywhere at once. Your compound eyes, which worked perfectly in the dim underground world, struggle to process all this visual information. Everything appears washed out and glaring. You try to find shelter, instinctively moving toward the darkest spot you can see, the shadow of a large tree. Each step is a learning experience. Your massive horn, which felt balanced and natural in the confined spaces below, now seems unwieldy. It catches on low-hanging branches and throws off your center of gravity when you try to move quickly. The tree trunk offers some relief from the brightness. You press against it, feeling the familiar texture of bark under your legs. It's not rotting wood, but it's close enough to provide comfort. You start to climb, your claws finding purchase in the rough surface. This feels more natural. You've always been good at climbing, even as a grub. But the tree presents new challenges. The bark is harder than the soft wood you grew up eating. When you try to take a bite, your mandibles scrape against the surface without making much progress. You're hungry after the long transformation and the climb to the surface, but this food source isn't cooperating. A beetle lands on the branch near you. It's smaller than you, shiny green with metallic highlights. You've never seen anything like it, but your predatory instincts kick in immediately. This could be food, and you definitely need food. You move toward it slowly, trying not to make noise on the bark. The beetle sees you coming and takes off immediately, buzzing away into the canopy above. You watch it disappear, realizing that many of the creatures up here have something you don't, the ability to fly. Your wings are there, folded against your back, but you have no idea how to use them. They feel heavy and awkward, like carrying equipment you don't know how to operate. You continue exploring the tree, moving from branch to branch. The higher you climb, the more the branches sway in the wind. This is another new sensation. The world itself is moving. Underground, everything was solid and stationary. Up here, the entire environment shifts and flows with forces you can't see or understand. A loud crack echoes through the forest. You freeze, pressing yourself against the branch, trying to identify the threat. Below you, a dead branch has fallen to the ground, probably weakened by rot and finally giving way to gravity. The sound reminds you of the log collapses you sometimes heard underground, but this is different, sharper, more violent. As the day progresses, you start to understand some of the rhythms of surface life. Birds are active, flying from tree to tree and calling to each other with sounds that pierce through the forest. Smaller insects buzz constantly, creating a background hum that never existed in your quiet underground world. Leaves rustle in the wind, creating a sound like distant rain. You're still hungry, but the bark of this tree isn't providing nutrition. You need to find something softer, something closer to the rotting wood you're used to. You climb down from the tree and start exploring the forest floor, looking for fallen logs or decaying stumps. The ground level is busier than the canopy. Ants march in organized lines, carrying bits of food back to their colonies. They give you a wide berth. Even the soldier ants seem to recognize that you're not something they want to mess with. Your size advantage is immediately apparent. You're not just big for a beetle, you're massive compared to most of the insects around here. You find a fallen log, partially decomposed and covered with moss. This looks promising. You approach it carefully, using your mandibles to test the wood. It's softer than the tree bark, but still tougher than what you're used to. You manage to bite off small pieces, chewing them slowly. The taste is different, earthier, with hints of minerals from the soil. While you're eating, something moves in your peripheral vision. You turn to see another beetle approaching, one that looks similar to you, but smaller. It's male, like you, with a prominent horn and a dark, glossy exoskeleton. For a moment, you both freeze, sizing each other up. This is your first encounter with another of your species since leaving the log where you were born. The other beetle is older, more experienced with surface life. His movements are confident and purposeful, while yours are still tentative and clumsy. He approaches the same log you're feeding on, clearly intending to share the resource. You don't back down. This log is yours. You found it first. You raise your horn slightly, a warning gesture that comes instinctively. The other beetle responds by raising his own horn. Neither of you moves for several seconds, locked in a tense standoff. Then he charges. His horn collides with yours, with a sharp crack that echoes through the forest. The impact sends vibrations through your entire body, but you hold your ground. You push back, using your powerful legs to drive forward. This is nothing like the quick encounter with the centipede underground. This is a test of pure strength. The two of you grapple, horns locked together, each trying to flip the other onto his back. Your muscles strain against his, and you can feel the incredible power in your legs and torso. You're built for this kind of combat, even though you've never done it before. Your body knows what to do. You manage to get better leverage and lift him slightly off the ground. He kicks frantically, trying to regain his footing, but you've got the advantage now. With a final surge of effort, you flip him completely over. He lands on his back with a thud, legs waving in the air. For a moment, he struggles to right himself. You could press your advantage, maybe even injure him, but something holds you back. He's not really a threat anymore, just another beetle looking for food. After a few seconds of awkward flailing, he manages to roll over and get back on his feet. He looks at you once, then walks away without attempting to reclaim the log. You've won your first territorial dispute. The victory feels good, confirming that your size and strength translate into real advantages in the surface world. But it also teaches you something important. Other males of your species are competitors. They want the same resources you do, and they're willing to fight for them. The log provides several meals over the next few days. You establish a routine of sorts, feeding in the early morning and evening when the light is less harsh, resting in the shade during the brightest parts of the day. Your eyes are gradually adjusting to the surface world, but you still prefer the dimmer conditions. During one of your feeding sessions, you notice movement in the sky above. A large bird circles overhead, riding the air currents with outstretched wings. You've seen birds before, but this one is different, bigger, with sharp talons and a hooked beak. It's hunting, scanning the ground for prey. You press yourself against the log, trying to blend in with the dark wood. Your black exoskeleton helps with camouflage, but you're still large enough to be visible from above. The bird makes several passes, each one lower than the last. You remain perfectly still, not even twitching your antennae. Finally, the bird moves on, apparently not spotting anything worth investigating. You wait several more minutes before resuming your feeding, but the encounter reminds you that being on the surface means being visible to predators you never had to worry about underground. As the days pass, you start to feel more confident moving around the forest floor. Your legs adapt to the uneven terrain, and your eyes adjust to the changing light conditions. You learn to read the shadows, using them to navigate and find shelter. You discover new food sources, rotting fruit that's fallen from trees, decaying leaves that have the right texture and smell. But you also start to feel something else, a restlessness that has nothing to do with hunger or safety. It's a new instinct, one that didn't exist during your underground years. You find yourself paying attention to scents in the air, subtle chemical signals that your antennae detect and your brain processes without conscious thought. One evening, as you're exploring a new section of the forest, you catch a scent that stops you in your tracks. It's different from anything you've encountered before, sweet, complex, and somehow compelling. Your antennae twitch involuntarily, trying to pinpoint the source. Every instinct tells you to follow this scent, even though you don't understand why. You begin tracking the smell through the forest, your massive form moving with surprising stealth. The scent grows stronger as you navigate around trees and over fallen logs. It's leading you away from your established territory into unfamiliar areas where you don't know the landmarks or hiding spots. The trail takes you to a large oak tree with a partially hollow trunk. The scent is strongest here, emanating from somewhere inside the tree. You approach carefully, your horn lowered slightly in case this turns out to be some kind of trap. But the closer you get, the more irresistible the scent becomes. You peer into the hollow, your eyes adjusting to the darkness inside. At first, you see nothing. Then movement catches your attention, something large shifting in the shadows. As your vision clears, you realize what you're looking at. It's another beetle, but this one is different, larger than the male you fought over the log, with a smoother shell and no horn. This is your first encounter with a female of your species. She's magnificent, easily as large as you, with an exoskeleton that gleams even in the dim light of the hollow. She moves with a grace that makes your own clumsy surface world navigation look amateur by comparison. She's been living up here much longer than you have. She notices you watching and turns to face you directly. There's no aggression in her posture, no challenge. But there's something else, an assessment like she's evaluating whether you're worth her attention. You realize that the scent you've been following is coming from her, some kind of chemical signal that drew you here across the forest. You don't know what to do next. Fighting another male was instinctive. You both wanted the same resource, so you competed for it. But this situation is entirely different. She's not a competitor or a threat. She's something else, something your newly matured brain recognizes as important, but doesn't quite know how to categorize yet. You take a step closer to the hollow. She doesn't retreat, but she doesn't move toward you either. She's waiting, watching to see what you'll do. Your horn, which served as a weapon against the other male, now feels awkward and cumbersome. You're not sure if you should display it prominently or try to minimize its threatening appearance. The standoff continues for several minutes. You're both perfectly still, reading each other's body language and chemical signals. Finally, she makes the first move. She steps partially out of the hollow, positioning herself where you can see her full form. She's even more impressive in full view. Her shell has subtle patterns and colors that you hadn't noticed from a distance. She begins what you later realize is a display behavior. She raises herself up on her legs, showing off her size and the quality of her exoskeleton. She moves her antennae in specific patterns, releasing more of the scent that drew you here. It's a performance, a way of communicating information about herself. You attempt to respond in kind, raising your own body and moving your horn in what you hope are impressive gestures. You feel clumsy and inexperienced compared to her smooth movements, but she doesn't seem put off by your amateur display. If anything, she appears mildly amused by your efforts. The interaction continues as night falls around you. Other forest sounds fade into the background, the chirping of crickets, the distant calls of nocturnal birds, the rustle of small mammals in the underbrush. Your entire world has narrowed to this hollow tree and the remarkable creature inside it. You're beginning to understand that this encounter represents something fundamental about your new life on the surface. The underground world was about survival, eating, growing, avoiding threats. But the surface world is about more than just staying alive. It's about connections, competitions, and purposes that extend beyond individual survival. As the hours pass, she eventually retreats deeper into the hollow, but she doesn't disappear entirely. You can still catch hints of her scent, still see the occasional movement in the shadows. She's letting you know she's there, but also that this first meeting is over. You'll need to prove yourself worthy of more direct interaction. You spend the rest of the night near the oak tree, not quite ready to leave this important location. You don't understand all the implications of what just happened, but you know it was significant. Something has changed in your relationship with the surface world. You're no longer just a refugee from the underground, trying to figure out how to survive up here. You're becoming a participant in the complex social dynamics of Beetle society. When morning comes, you finally begin the journey back to your own territory. But you know you'll return to this tree, drawn by instincts you're only beginning to comprehend. The surface world is revealing new layers of complexity with each passing day, and you're starting to realize that your transformation from grub to beetle was just the beginning of a much larger change. The days following your encounter with the female become a blur of new experiences and growing confidence. You establish patterns now, routines that make the surface world feel less foreign. Morning feeding sessions focus on the softest wood you can find, fallen branches that have been weathered by rain and colonized by the right kinds of fungi. The taste is different from your underground diet, earthier and more complex, but your digestive system adapts quickly. You've learned to read the forest's daily rhythms. Birds are most active in the early morning and late afternoon, so you time your movements to avoid their hunting periods. The midday hours, when the sun is harshest, become your rest time. You've found several good hiding spots: a cluster of large rocks near a stream, the hollow base of an old stump, a depression under a fallen log, where the shadows stay deep even when the sun is directly overhead. Your vision has improved dramatically. What once seemed like an overwhelming flood of light now resolves into distinct shapes and patterns. You can differentiate between the greens of living leaves and the browns of dead ones. You notice the subtle movements that indicate other insects nearby. Most importantly, you can spot potential threats from much greater distances. A week after the oak tree encounter, you're exploring a new section of forest when you smell something that makes your antennae twitch with excitement. It's not the complex, attractive scent of the female. This is something simpler, but equally compelling. Food, but not just any food. This smells like the richest, most nutritious wood you've ever encountered. You follow the scent through a maze of undergrowth, pushing past ferns and low branches that would have been impossible to navigate when you first emerged from underground. Your movements are fluid now, efficient. You've learned to use your horn as a tool for parting vegetation, not just a weapon for fighting other males. The trail leads you to something unexpected, a human structure. It's a wooden fence, old and weathered, with several posts showing signs of rot and insect damage. The smell is coming from one post in particular, where the wood has begun to soften and darken with decay. It's perfect beetle food, concentrated in an easily accessible location. You approach cautiously. Humans are something you've heard about, but never seen. giant creatures that move through the forest occasionally, leaving behind scents and disturbances that other insects avoid. The fence represents your first direct encounter with human-made objects, and you're not sure what to expect. The post is safe enough. Whatever humans were here, they're long gone, leaving only this slowly deteriorating barrier behind. You test the wood with your mandibles and find it even better than you hoped. It's soft enough to chew easily, but still rich with the nutrients you need. You settle in for an extended feeding session. While you're eating, you become aware of other insects attracted to the same resource. A small colony of termites has established itself in an adjacent post, their tiny workers streaming back and forth in organized lines. They give you plenty of space. Your size advantage is overwhelming, but you watch their behavior with interest. They're so much more organized than you are, working together with the efficiency you can't match as a solitary creature. A wood-boring beetle arrives while you're feeding. It's much smaller than you, specialized for getting into tight spaces you can't access. Instead of competing directly, it seems content to work on sections of the post you've ignored. There's enough food here for both of you, and neither poses a threat to the other. This peaceful coexistence is interrupted by the arrival of something more challenging, a stag beetle almost as large as you and equipped with impressive mandibles that look like they could do serious damage. Unlike the smaller insects, this one clearly sees you as competition for the prime feeding spot. The stag beetle approaches with obvious aggressive intent. Its mandibles are spread wide in a threat display, and its body posture suggests it's ready to fight. You've learned enough about surface world dynamics to recognize the challenge. This isn't going to be like your encounter with the other rhinoceros beetle. Stag beetles fight differently, using their mandibles like swords instead of wrestling with horns. You respond with your own threat display, raising your horn and spreading your legs to appear as large as possible. The stag beetle doesn't back down. It advances slowly, mandibles clicking together in a sound that's probably meant to be intimidating. You hold your ground, but you're not entirely sure how to fight this kind of opponent. The attack comes suddenly. The stag beetle lunges forward, trying to grab you with its oversized mandibles. You dodge to the side, using your horn to deflect the attack. Its mandibles scrape against your exoskeleton with a sound like fingernails on stone, but they don't penetrate your armor. You counterattack immediately, trying to get underneath its guard and flip it over like you did with the other male. But stag beetles are built differently, lower to the ground, with a more stable center of gravity. Your horn connects with its head, but instead of lifting it up, you just push it backward. The fight becomes a strange dance of attack and evasion. The stag beetle tries to grab you with its mandibles, while you attempt to use your horn and superior size to overpower it. Neither of you can get a decisive advantage. You're stronger, but it's more maneuverable. Its mandibles are dangerous, but your armor is thicker. Finally, you manage to catch it off balance during one of its attacks. Your horn connects with its side, and you use all your leg strength to drive forward. The stag beetle tumbles over, landing hard on its back. Unlike your previous opponent, it can't right itself easily. Its mandibles are too long and awkward to provide leverage from that position. You stand over it for a moment, both of you breathing hard from the exertion. The stag beetle waves its legs frantically, trying to find something to grab onto. You could probably finish it off if you wanted to, but like before, something holds you back. It's not really a threat anymore, just another insect looking for food. You step back and watch as it finally manages to grab a small stick with its mandibles, using it to lever itself back onto its feet. It looks at you once, mandibles still spread in what might be either threat or acknowledgement, then walks away without another challenge. The encounter leaves you feeling more confident about your place in the forest hierarchy. You're not just surviving on the surface anymore. You're establishing yourself as a dominant presence. Other insects recognize your strength and give you the respect that comes with being one of the largest beetles in the ecosystem. Your feeding continues undisturbed for the rest of the day. The fence post provides enough nutrition to sustain you for several days, but you don't want to monopolize the resource entirely. You eat what you need, then move on, leaving plenty for the other insects that depend on rotting wood for survival. As evening approaches, you find yourself thinking about the oak tree and the female you encountered there. The memory of her scent still triggers responses in your nervous system that you don't fully understand. It's been over a week since that first meeting, and something inside you is urging you to return. The journey back to her territory takes you through areas of the forest you're becoming familiar with. You know which paths are safest, which trees provide the best shelter, which logs are most likely to harbor good food. Your mental map of the surface world is expanding rapidly, turning what was once a confusing maze into a navigable landscape. You approach the oak tree more confidently this time. Your movements are quieter, more controlled. You've learned to minimize the sound your heavy body makes when moving through leaf litter and undergrowth. The skills you developed as a grub, moving silently through confined spaces, translate surprisingly well to surface navigation. Her scent is stronger tonight, more complex than before. As you get closer to the hollow, you realize she's not alone. There are other scents mixed with hers, male scents indicating that other beetles have discovered her location. Your antennae twitch with what you're beginning to recognize as jealousy, though you don't have a word for the emotion yet. You peer around the base of the oak tree and see them, two other males, both impressive specimens, positioned near the entrance to the hollow. They're not fighting each other, but there's obvious tension in their postures. Both are waiting for something, probably hoping for a chance to interact with the female inside. One of them notices your approach and turns to face you. He's larger than the male you fought over the log, with a horn that's almost as impressive as yours. His exoskeleton gleams with the kind of luster that comes from good nutrition and optimal development. This isn't going to be an easy confrontation if it comes to violence. The second male is smaller, but looks more experienced. His shell shows the scars of previous battles, and his movements have the efficient economy of someone who survived multiple encounters with competitors. He might be past his physical prime, but he's clearly learned how to use his experience to compensate. You approach slowly, trying to assess the situation before committing to any particular course of action. The female's scent is definitely coming from inside the hollow, but you can't see her from your current position. She might be watching this developing confrontation, evaluating which male is most worthy of her attention. The larger male makes the first move, stepping forward to block your access to the tree. His message is clear. This territory is claimed, and you're not welcome. The smaller male doesn't interfere, apparently content to let you and the larger beetle sort things out between yourselves. You respond with your own territorial display, raising your horn and spreading your legs to show your full size. You've grown since your last fight, and you're probably at your physical peak now. Your confidence shows in your posture. You're not the confused refugee from underground anymore. You're a formidable opponent who's earned his place in the surface world. The standoff lasts several minutes, Both of you are calculating odds, looking for weaknesses, trying to determine if the potential reward is worth the risk of serious injury. Fighting over food is one thing. There are always other logs, other sources of nutrition. But this situation feels different, more important somehow. The attack, so when it comes, is explosive. The larger male charges with surprising speed, his horn aimed directly at your head. You barely have time to brace yourself before the impact sends shockwaves through your entire body. Your own horn locks with his, and suddenly you're engaged in the most intense wrestling match of your life. This opponent is stronger than anyone you've fought before. His leg muscles strain against yours with power that matches your own. For the first time since emerging from underground, you're not clearly the dominant beetle in a confrontation. This is a genuine test of your capabilities. You grapple for what feels like hours but is probably only minutes. Neither of you can gain a decisive advantage. Your horns remain locked together while your legs scramble for purchase on the uneven ground around the tree. The smaller male watches from a safe distance, probably hoping you'll both exhaust yourselves and leave him an opening. Finally, you manage to shift your weight at just the right moment, using your opponent's own momentum against him. He stumbles slightly, and that tiny opening is all you need. You drive forward with everything you have, lifting him off the ground and slamming him down hard enough to knock the wind out of him. He recovers quickly, rolling away and getting back to his feet before you can press your advantage. But something has changed in his demeanor. The confident aggression is gone, replaced by a more cautious assessment of your capabilities. He's realized that beating you isn't going to be as easy as he initially thought. The second round of combat is more tactical. Both of you are looking for openings, trying to use technique to overcome the other's raw strength. You've learned to use your horn more precisely, not just as a battering ram, but as a lever and a grappling tool. He responds by trying to get under your guard, using his slightly lower profile to attack from angles your horn can't easily defend. The fight might have continued indefinitely, but it's interrupted by movement from the hollow. She emerges, not all the way, but far enough to be clearly visible. Her presence changes everything. Suddenly, this isn't just about territorial dominance or male competition. It's about proving worthiness to the most magnificent beetle you've ever seen. Both you and your opponent pause, breathing heavily, horns still partially locked together. She watches the confrontation with what looks like mild interest, as if she's evaluating the quality of the males competing for her attention. Her antennae move in subtle patterns that probably convey information you're not sophisticated enough to decode yet. Then she does something unexpected. She moves toward the smaller, scarred male who's been watching from the sidelines. Your opponent and you are so focused on each other that we've forgotten about him entirely, but she apparently hasn't. She approaches him directly, releasing more of the complex scent that drew you here in the first place. The scarred male responds immediately, moving toward her with movements that are smooth and confident despite his smaller size. He knows something about female behavior that you and your opponent clearly don't. While you've been fighting over territory, he's been reading her signals and positioning himself accordingly. Your opponent realizes what's happening at the same moment you do. The female isn't interested in the winner of your combat. She's made her own choice based on criteria that have nothing to do with physical dominance. Both of you have been outmaneuvered by someone who understood the situation better than either combatant. The larger male disengages first, stepping back with what might be disappointment or resignation. You follow suit, your horn separating from his with a scraping sound, Both of you are battered and exhausted from the fight, and neither has anything to show for it. The female and the scarred male disappear into the hollow together, leaving you and your former opponent standing in awkward proximity. The tension between you hasn't entirely dissipated, but the immediate cause of conflict is gone. After a few moments of uncertain standoff, he turns and walks away into the forest. You remain near the oak tree for a while longer, processing what just happened. Your first serious attempt at courtship has been a complete failure, but it's also been educational. Raw strength and fighting ability aren't the only factors that matter in Beetle society. There are subtleties of behavior and communication that you're only beginning to understand. Eventually, you begin the journey back to your own territory, moving more slowly than usual. Your exoskeleton aches from the prolonged combat, and your pride is bruised along with your body. But you're also oddly energized by the experience. The failure stings, but it's also motivated you to learn more about the complex social dynamics of surface life. Over the following days, you pay more attention to the interactions between other insects. You watch how different species communicate, how they establish territories, how they compete for resources and mates. The forest is full of lessons if you know how to observe and interpret what you're seeing. You also start to notice that your own behavior is changing in subtle ways. You're more attentive to scents in the air, more aware of the chemical signals that other beetles leave behind. Your antennae have become more sensitive, picking up information that was always there, but that you hadn't learned to process effectively. A few weeks after the oak tree incident, you encounter another female. This one is smaller than the first, but still impressive in her own right. She's feeding on a rotting stump when you discover her, and unlike your previous experience, there are no other males in the immediate area. You approach more carefully this time, paying attention to her body language and the chemical signals she's releasing. Instead of focusing entirely on your own display behavior, you try to read her responses and adjust accordingly. It's a more nuanced approach than your previous crude attempts at courtship. She notices your approach, but doesn't flee or retreat into hiding. That's encouraging. At least you're not immediately disqualified as a potential mate. You begin what you hope is a more sophisticated courtship display, combining physical posturing with careful attention to her reactions. Your improved technique shows results. She responds positively to some of your gestures, moving closer instead of maintaining distance. The interaction develops into a complex dance of approach and withdrawal, signal and response. You're both evaluating each other, determining compatibility through methods that are largely instinctual but surprisingly effective. The courtship process takes most of the night. Unlike your previous failure, this encounter proceeds through recognizable stages. Initial contact gives way to mutual assessment, which develops into more intimate interaction. By dawn, you've successfully mated for the first time. The experience is transformative in ways you hadn't expected. It's not just the physical act itself, but the entire process of successful courtship that changes your understanding of beetle society. You've proven yourself capable of more than just fighting and feeding. You can participate in the complex social behaviors that define adult beetle life. Your partner doesn't remain with you after mating. She has her own agenda, her own territory to maintain and resources to secure. But the encounter leaves you with a sense of accomplishment that's different from winning fights or finding good food. You've successfully passed on your genetic material, fulfilling one of the fundamental drives that brought you to the surface in the first place. The summer progresses, and you establish yourself as one of the dominant males in your section of the forest. You've won enough fights to secure prime feeding territories, and you've had several more successful mating encounters. Your reputation spreads through the chemical communication networks that beetles use to share information about threats, resources, and potential mates. But you're also beginning to notice changes in yourself that suggest your time of peak performance may be limited. Your movements aren't quite as quick as they were earlier in the season. Your appetite has decreased slightly, and you don't recover from fights as rapidly as you used to. The surface world is demanding, and even the strongest beetles eventually show the effects of constant competition and environmental stress. These subtle signs of aging don't diminish your effectiveness immediately, but they remind you that your window of dominance won't last forever. Every successful mating, every territorial victory, every day of survival on the surface represents an achievement that becomes more significant as you realize how temporary your peak abilities are. You continue to patrol your territory, defend your resources, and seek out mating opportunities. But there's a new awareness underlying all these activities, an understanding that your time as one of the forest's apex beetles is both precious and finite. The underground world that shaped your early development seems like a distant memory now, replaced by the immediate demands of adult beetle society. The lessons you've learned on the surface have prepared you for the challenges that lie ahead, but they've also made you aware of how much more complex and demanding life becomes when you're no longer just focused on individual survival. You're part of a larger ecosystem now, connected to other beetles through competition, cooperation, and reproduction in ways that will define the rest of your existence. You're beginning to understand that the surface world operates on cycles you never experienced underground. The days grow shorter, and the air carries a different quality, sharper, with hints of something approaching that you can't quite identify. Your instincts tell you change is coming, but you don't know what kind of change or how to prepare for it. The other beetles in your territory are behaving differently too. Some of the older ones have become less active, spending more time hidden in crevices and hollow logs. The younger males are more aggressive, challenging you for resources they wouldn't have dared contest earlier in the season. It's as if everyone senses that time is running out for something. You notice the trees are changing color. Leaves that were deep green all summer are now turning yellow, orange, and red. They fall more frequently, carpeting the forest floor with a rustling layer that makes quiet movement nearly impossible. The sound of your footsteps echoes differently now, announcing your presence to everything within hearing range. Food sources are becoming scarcer. The logs and stumps you've been feeding on all season are either exhausted or too hard to digest efficiently. You have to range further from your established territory to find adequate nutrition, venturing into areas controlled by other beetles who are facing the same resource shortages. These expanded foraging trips lead to more frequent confrontations. A male you've never encountered before challenges you over a partially rotted branch that would have been considered marginal food earlier in the year. Now it represents a valuable resource worth fighting for. The battle is brief, but vicious. Both of you are hungrier and more desperate than you would have been months ago. You win, but the victory feels different from your earlier triumphs. There's no satisfaction in defeating a competitor who's obviously struggling with the same environmental pressures you are. The forest is becoming a harsher place, and success now means survival rather than dominance. The temperature drops noticeably one night, and when you emerge from your shelter the next morning, the world looks different. A thin layer of white crystals covers the fallen leaves, your first encounter with frost. The cold makes your movement sluggish, and your joints ache in ways they never have before. You try to continue your normal activities, but everything is more difficult now. The wood you attempt to chew is harder, almost frozen in places. Whoop. Your mandibles scrape against surfaces that should be soft and yielding. Even walking becomes an effort, as your legs struggle to generate the coordination you've always taken for granted. Other insects are disappearing entirely. The ants that once marched in organized columns have vanished. The smaller beetles that used to compete with you for resources are nowhere to be seen. You realize you haven't heard the constant background buzz of flying insects in days. The forest is becoming eerily quiet. You seek shelter in a hollow log, the same kind of rotting wood that provided both home and food during your underground years. But now it's just shelter, protection from the cold and wind that seem to sap your strength with every passing hour. You curl up inside, trying to conserve body heat and energy. Sleep comes easier now, but it's different from the brief rest periods you took during the active season. These are longer periods of unconsciousness, times when your body shuts down to preserve resources. You dream sometimes, confused images of tunnels and darkness, mixed with memories of sunlight and territorial battles. When you wake from these extended sleeps, you're often disoriented. The world outside the log looks different each time. More leaves have fallen, the frost persists longer into the day, and the few remaining insects move with the same sluggish desperation you feel in your own body. You make fewer attempts to leave your shelter. The energy required to search for food often exceeds what you can actually find and consume. Your body begins using its own stored resources, metabolizing muscle mass and fat reserves to keep essential functions operating. You're slowly consuming yourself to stay alive. One morning, you wake to find the entrance to your log partially blocked by something white and soft. Snow, though you don't have a name for it, since the cold is more intense than anything you've experienced, penetrating through your exoskeleton and making even the smallest movements painful. You try to push through the snow barrier, but your strength is insufficient. Your legs, which once could flip opponents twice your size, now struggle to clear away this light, fluffy obstacle. You retreat deeper into the log, accepting that the outside world has become temporarily inaccessible. The darkness inside the log reminds you of your underground years, but this is different. Then, darkness meant safety and abundant food. Now it means isolation and slowly diminishing resources. Your body continues its process of controlled shutdown, reducing all non-essential functions to preserve energy for basic survival. Days pass without clear distinction between sleeping and waking. Your consciousness drifts between different states. Sometimes you're aware of your current situation, trapped in a cold log waiting for conditions to improve. Other times you're back underground, a grub surrounded by siblings, eating constantly and growing larger with each molt. The snow outside deepens, and your log becomes completely buried. You're sealed inside a small chamber with limited air circulation and no possibility of escape. Your breathing slows, your heart rate decreases, and your body temperature drops to match the environment around you. This is hibernation, though you don't understand the concept. Your body is entering a state of suspended animation, shutting down all but the most critical functions to survive the winter months. It's a process your species has perfected over millions of years, but experiencing it for the first time is disorienting and frightening. Your dreams become more vivid and strange. You're flying, something you never actually learned to do, soaring above the forest canopy and seeing the landscape from perspectives that should be impossible. You're fighting battles against enormous opponents, using strength you no longer possess. You're courting females who transform into different creatures entirely as you approach them. Time loses meaning in the hibernation state. Hours feel like days, days feel like minutes. Your body's internal clock, which once regulated feeding schedules and territorial patrols, becomes unreliable. You exist in a twilight state between life and death, maintained by biological processes you can't control or understand. Occasionally, you experience brief moments of clarity. These usually coincide with slight temperature increases that penetrate through the snow and into your log shelter. During these moments, you're aware of your situation, buried alive in a wooden tomb, surviving on stored energy that diminishes with each passing day. The cold reaches depths that make even hibernation difficult. Your body's ability to maintain basic functions is tested to its limits. Some beetles don't survive these extreme conditions. Their bodies simply shut down completely, never to wake again when spring arrives. You hover on the edge of this final sleep, your life force maintained by the narrowest of margins. But your underground years prepared you for survival in confined spaces with limited resources. The patience you developed as a grub, waiting months between molts, serves you well now. Your body knows how to endure, how to reduce its needs to the absolute minimum while still maintaining the spark of life. The snow above your log begins to thin as temperatures gradually warm. More light penetrates down to your level, and the air circulation improves slightly. Your hibernation starts to lighten, periods of awareness becoming more frequent and lasting longer. Your body begins the slow process of awakening from its winter shutdown. Movement returns gradually. First, slight twitches in your antennae as they respond to changing chemical signals in the air. Then, small movements of your legs as circulation improves and muscles remember their functions. Your mandibles work experimentally, preparing for the feeding that will be necessary once you can escape your winter prison. The snow continues to melt, and eventually you hear sounds from outside, dripping water, the crack of ice breaking, the distant calls of birds returning to the forest. Spring is coming, and your body responds with increasing urgency to emerge from hibernation and resume active life. You begin working at the debris, blocking your log entrance, pushing against the remaining snow and ice with renewed strength. Your movements are clumsy at first, but coordination returns as your nervous system fully awakens. After months of immobility, even simple actions require conscious effort and concentration. Finally, the barrier gives way, and you emerge into a transformed world. The forest looks completely different from when you entered hibernation. Snow still covers much of the ground, but patches of brown earth show through where the sun has been strongest. The trees are bare, their branches stark against the gray sky. You're weak from months of inactivity and internal consumption of your own body mass. Your exoskeleton feels loose in places where muscle has been metabolized for survival. Your movements are slow and uncertain as you relearn how to navigate the three-dimensional world outside your log. The first priority is food. Your body is desperate for nutrition to rebuild what was lost during hibernation. You search for any accessible source of organic matter, soft bark, early fungal growth, even the remains of other insects that didn't survive the winter. Everything tastes different after months of fasting, more intense and immediately satisfying. Other beetles are emerging from their own hibernation sites, and you're struck by how much the population has changed. Many of the competitors you remember from last year are simply gone, victims of the harsh winter conditions. The survivors look as worn and depleted as you feel, their once glossy exoskeletons now dull and scarred. The territorial boundaries that seemed so important last year have been erased by winter. Everyone is starting over, claiming new resources and establishing fresh hierarchies based on current capabilities rather than past dominance. You're no longer the formidable competitor you once were, but neither is anyone else. You encounter a female near a promising food source, a fallen tree that's beginning to soften with spring moisture. She's in similar condition to you, obviously a hibernation survivor working to rebuild her strength. The courtship behaviors that seemed so complex last year now feel almost instinctive, simplified by shared experience and mutual need. The mating is successful, but different from your previous encounters. There's less competition, less elaborate display behavior. Both of you are focused on the practical necessities of reproduction while physical condition allows. The spring breeding season is shorter and more urgent than the leisurely summer courtships you remember. As weeks pass, you gradually regain strength and mass. Your exoskeleton tightens as muscle rebuilds beneath it. Your movements become more coordinated and confident, but you're also aware that you're not returning to your previous peak condition. The winter has aged you in ways that go beyond simple physical wear. You establish a new territory, smaller than your previous domain but adequate for your current needs. The competition is less intense now, partly because there are fewer beetles overall, but also because everyone seems to understand that survival is more important than dominance. The forest has imposed a harsh lesson in humility on all its inhabitants. Your feeding behavior changes too. You're more conservative in your energy expenditure, less likely to engage in prolonged fights over marginal resources. Experience has taught you to distinguish between battles worth fighting and those better avoided. Age brings wisdom, even to beetles. The summer proceeds more quietly than the previous year. You mate several more times, always with the awareness that each successful encounter might be your last. Your body shows increasing signs of accumulated wear, small chips in your exoskeleton, a slight asymmetry in your horn from old battle damage, a barely perceptible tremor in your legs during extended activity. You notice younger beetles arriving in your territory, fresh from their own underground transformations. They move with the same clumsy confidence you remember having when you first emerged. Some challenge you directly, seeing an aging beetle as an easy target for territorial expansion. These fights are more difficult now. Your strength is diminished, your reflexes slower, but you've learned to use experience and technique to compensate for reduced physical capabilities. You choose your battles carefully, using superior knowledge of the terrain and more efficient fighting methods to overcome younger but less skilled opponents. One evening, while feeding on a particularly soft section of rotted log, you're approached by a young male who clearly intends to claim your food source. He's impressive, large, unmarked by battle, moving with the fluid confidence of peak physical condition. Everything about him reminds you of yourself a year ago. The challenge is inevitable. He displays aggressively, raising his horn and spreading his legs to show his full size. You respond with your own threat posture, but both of you can probably sense that this won't be like your previous victories. You're past your prime, and he's just entering his. The fight is brief, but decisive. His strength overwhelms your technique, and you find yourself flipped onto your back with embarrassing ease. You struggle to right yourself while he stands over you, mandibles clicking in what sounds like satisfaction. When you finally manage to get back on your feet, he's already claimed the log and begun feeding. You walk away without attempting to reclaim the resource. There's no shame in recognizing when you're outmatched. It's simply the reality of aging in a world where physical capability determines access to resources. Your time of easy dominance is over, but your time of survival continues. You adapt to your new status in the forest hierarchy. Instead of controlling the best feeding sites, you learn to exploit marginal resources that younger beetles overlook. Instead of fighting for prime territories, you establish yourself in areas that are adequate but not worth competing for. This adjustment isn't entirely negative. The reduced stress of constant competition allows you to focus on other aspects of beetle life. You become more aware of environmental changes, more sensitive to the subtle chemical signals that carry information through the forest. Your understanding of beetle society deepens as you observe rather than simply participate in its dynamics. You also discover that experience has value beyond fighting ability. Younger beetles occasionally approach you, not aggressively, but with what seems like curiosity about your behavior. They watch how you select feeding sites, how you avoid predators, how you navigate challenging terrain. Knowledge gained through survival has its own form of respect. The second winter approaches more quickly than the first seemed to. You recognize the signs now: the changing light, the cooling air, the gradual disappearance of other insects. This time, you prepare more systematically, seeking out the most protected shelter you can find and ensuring access to food sources that will remain available as long as possible. Your hibernation site is a deep crevice in a large boulder, protected from wind and insulated by accumulated leaf litter. It's smaller than your previous winter shelter, but more secure. You settle in as the first frost arrives, your body beginning the familiar shutdown process with less anxiety than the year before. The second hibernation is both easier and harder than the first. Easier because you understand what's happening and don't fight the process. Harder because your body has fewer reserves to draw upon and less resilience to maintain basic functions through the coldest periods. Your dreams during this hibernation are different, less about impossible flying and epic battles, more about quiet moments from your surface life. Successful hunts, peaceful feeding sessions, the satisfaction of finding perfect shelter. Your subconscious seems to be processing and storing the experiences that define your identity as a beetle. You wake occasionally during the winter, brief moments of awareness triggered by temperature fluctuations or changes in air pressure. During these moments, you're increasingly aware of your body's fragility. The margin between survival and death has narrowed significantly. You're living on borrowed time, sustained by biological processes that are themselves wearing down. Spring arrives late, and your emergence from hibernation is more difficult than the previous year. Your movements are stiff and uncertain, your coordination severely compromised by months of inactivity. It takes days rather than hours to regain basic mobility, and weeks to approach anything resembling normal function. The forest population has thinned further. Many of the beetles you remember from previous years are gone, and fewer new ones seem to be emerging from underground. You're becoming part of an increasingly select group of long-term survivors, beetles who've managed to endure multiple winters and breeding seasons. Your territory this year is even smaller, confined to a few reliable food sources that you can defend with your diminished capabilities, but it's adequate for your reduced needs. Your appetite has decreased along with your activity level, and you no longer require the extensive resources that once seemed essential. You mate one more time that summer with a female who seems as worn and experienced as yourself. The encounter is gentle rather than passionate, a quiet affirmation of continued life rather than an urgent drive for reproduction. Both of you understand that you're participating in cycles larger than individual survival. As autumn approaches again, you begin to sense that this may be your final winter preparation. Your body's responses to environmental changes are sluggish, and your energy reserves are minimal. The prospect of another hibernation feels daunting in ways it never did before. You select your winter shelter with particular care, a hollow in an old oak tree, deep enough to provide protection, but with good drainage to prevent flooding during spring thaws. You line it with soft materials and position yourself for maximum warmth retention. Every detail matters when survival margins are this narrow. The third hibernation begins normally, your body following familiar patterns of shutdown and resource conservation. But as winter deepens, you become aware that something is different this time. The usual dreams don't come. Periods of awareness become shorter and less frequent. Your body is struggling to maintain even the minimal functions that's necessary for survival. You drift between states of consciousness that become increasingly difficult to distinguish. Sometimes you're aware of your current situation, sometimes lost in memories of underground tunnels and surface battles. The boundaries between past and present, dream and reality, life and death begin to blur. Your body continues its function through sheer biological momentum, but the systems that have sustained you through 2 previous winters are finally reaching their limits. The cold penetrates deeper, and your ability to generate internal heat diminishes with each passing day. In your final moments of clear awareness, you're not afraid. Death doesn't feel like an ending so much as a completion. The natural conclusion of a life that began in darkness, emerged into light, fought its battles, found its mates, and survived as long as biology and circumstance allowed. Your breathing slows and eventually stops. Your heart, which has beaten millions of times since your emergence from the underground world, finally grows still. The chemical processes that maintained your life cease one by one, and your body becomes part of the forest ecosystem that sustained you. Spring arrives, but you don't wake from this final hibernation. Your body remains in the oak hollow, slowly decomposing and returning its elements to the soil that will nourish future generations of trees, insects, and countless other forms of life. But your legacy continues in ways you never could have understood. The offspring from your matings have survived their own underground development and are beginning to emerge into the surface world. They carry your genetic material forward, adapted and refined by the challenges you faced and overcame during your time above ground. The forest itself bears the subtle marks of your presence. The logs you excavated, the territories you defended, the competitors you defeated or lost to, all contributed to the complex web of relationships that define the ecosystem. Your life was both insignificant in the broader scope of natural processes and absolutely essential to the specific circumstances that shaped your corner of the world. New beetles emerge from rotting logs, beginning their own journeys from underground darkness to surface complexity. They face the same challenges you encountered, learning to navigate three-dimensional space, competing for resources, avoiding predators, finding mates, surviving winters. Each will write their own story of struggle and adaptation. Some will thrive and dominate their territories for multiple seasons. Others will fall to predators, disease, or environmental challenges before reaching their full potential. A few will achieve the kind of longevity you managed, living long enough to understand the cycles that govern beetle existence and to pass that understanding on through their behavior and their genes. The rotting log where your life began continues its slow process of decomposition, providing food and shelter for countless other organisms. New eggs are laid in its softening wood. New grubs begin the patient process of growth and transformation that you completed years ago. The cycle continues, as it has for millions of years, and will for millions more. Your story is both unique and universal, the tale of an individual life lived within the constraints and opportunities provided by biology and environment. You experienced consciousness, made choices, faced challenges, achieved victories, suffered defeats, and ultimately returned to the elements from which you came. The surface world continues its seasonal rhythms, indifferent to the passing of any individual beetle, but dependent on the collective contributions of all the creatures that call it home. Your life was a single thread in an impossibly complex tapestry, but without that thread, the pattern would be incomplete. In some corner of the forest, bacteria and fungi begin their work on your remains. They break down your exoskeleton, releasing the calcium and chitin back into the soil. Your muscles become nitrogen for growing plants. Your stored fats feed microscopic organisms that form the base of food webs you never knew existed. Even in death, you're contributing to the endless cycle of consumption and growth that defines forest life. The hollow in the oak tree, where you spent your final winter, becomes home to other creatures. A family of wood-boring beetles discovers the space and uses it as a nursery for their larvae. Spiders weave webs across the entrance, catching flies that might have competed with you for resources when you were alive. Nothing in the forest goes unused for long. Your genetic legacy spreads through the beetle population in ways that would have surprised you. Some of your offspring inherit your exceptional size and strength. Others get your ability to survive harsh winters or your skill at finding the richest food sources. A few combine traits from both parents in new ways, creating beetles better adapted to changing environmental conditions than either parent alone. So as one of your sons emerges from his underground development during an unusually warm spring, he's larger than you ever were, with a horn that curves at a slightly different angle and mandibles that seem designed for a different kind of combat. He faces challenges you never encountered, new predators, changing climate patterns, human activities that alter the forest in unprecedented ways. Your daughters carry genetic material that will influence beetle populations for generations. Some become the mothers of entire lineages, their reproductive success ensuring that your DNA spreads through the forest ecosystem. Others fail to mate successfully, but their presence still affects the breeding choices of males and the competitive dynamics of their territories. The forest itself is changing in ways you never witnessed. Warmer temperatures mean longer growing seasons, but also more severe droughts. New invasive species arrive, competing with native beetles for resources and introducing diseases that can devastate established populations. Some of your descendants will adapt to these changes, others won't survive them. A great-grandson of yours develops an unusual behavior. Instead of fighting other males directly, he learns to avoid confrontation by feeding at different times and in different locations. This strategy proves so successful that he lives longer and mates more frequently than his more aggressive relatives. His approach spreads through the population, changing the social dynamics of beetle society in subtle but significant ways. One of your great-granddaughters inherits an enhanced ability to detect chemical signals. She can identify high-quality mates from greater distances and avoid areas where predators are hunting. Her superior sensory capabilities give her offspring advantages that compound over generations, making her lineage increasingly successful in the complex world of forest survival. The rotting logs that sustained your generation are gradually disappearing, consumed by insects and decomposed by weather. But new trees fall each winter, creating fresh opportunities for the next generation of wood-boring beetles. The specific resources change, but the fundamental relationships between beetles, wood, and forest ecosystem remain constant. Climate patterns shift in ways that make hibernation more challenging. Some winters are so mild that beetles never fully enter dormancy, burning through energy reserves they'll need for spring reproduction. Other winters are so severe that even the most protected shelters can't provide adequate insulation. Your descendants must adapt to this increased variability or face extinction. A great-great-grandson of yours develops the ability to digest a type of fungus that previous generations couldn't process. This adaptation opens up new food sources, just as traditional ones become scarcer. His lineage thrives while others struggle, demonstrating how small genetic changes can have enormous ecological consequences over time. Human activities introduce new variables into the forest ecosystem. Roads fragment beetle territories, making it harder for individuals to find mates and establish viable populations. Pollution changes the chemistry of rotting wood, affecting its nutritional value and digestibility. Some beetle lineages adapt to these changes, others decline toward extinction. But life finds ways to persist. Your descendants discover that human structures can provide unexpected opportunities. Wooden fence posts, abandoned buildings, and even telephone poles create new habitats that didn't exist during your lifetime. Some beetles learn to exploit these artificial resources, expanding their range into areas that were previously unsuitable. A distant descendant of yours develops an unusual relationship with a species of ant. Instead of competing directly for food, the beetle learns to follow ant trails to discover rich sources of rotting organic matter. The ants benefit by having larger beetles break down tough materials they can't process alone. This cooperation creates advantages for both species. The forest canopy changes as older trees die and younger ones take their place. These shifts affect the microclimate at ground level, altering temperature and humidity patterns that influence beetle development. Some of your genetic lineages prove better adapted to these new conditions than others, leading to changes in population distribution and density. Disease outbreaks periodically sweep through beetle populations, killing individuals who lack immunity to specific pathogens. Your descendants who inherited strong immune systems survive these epidemics and reproduce, while those with genetic vulnerabilities disappear from the population. Natural selection continues its relentless work, refining beetle biology for maximum survival efficiency. Predator populations fluctuate in response to environmental changes and human activities. When bird numbers decline due to habitat loss, beetle populations can expand rapidly. When new predators are introduced to the ecosystem, beetles must develop new defensive strategies or face dramatic population reductions. Your genetic contributions help determine which lineages survive these challenges. Some of your descendants develop the ability to fly more effectively than you ever could. They use this capability to disperse over greater distances, finding mates and resources that would have been inaccessible to ground-bound beetles. This increased mobility helps maintain genetic diversity across fragmented forest landscapes. Others inherit enhanced digging abilities that allow them to create more sophisticated hibernation chambers. These improved shelters provide better protection from temperature extremes and predators, increasing winter survival rates. The genes responsible for these traits spread through the population as their advantages become apparent. A lineage descended from one of your daughters develops an unusual feeding strategy. Instead of focusing entirely on rotting wood, they learn to supplement their diet with organic matter in forest soil. This dietary flexibility allows them to survive in areas where traditional food sources are scarce, expanding their ecological niche. The chemical communication systems that beetles use to find mates and avoid predators become more sophisticated over generations. Your descendants develop new pheromones and more sensitive detection abilities, creating increasingly complex social networks that span entire forest ecosystems. These communication improvements enhance both individual survival and species-wide coordination. Environmental pressures favor beetles with more efficient metabolisms. Your descendants who can extract more energy from limited food sources or survive longer periods without eating have significant advantages during resource-scarce periods. These traits become more common in the population as natural selection rewards efficiency. Some genetic lineages develop enhanced cold tolerance, allowing them to remain active longer into winter and emerge earlier in spring. This extended activity period provides more opportunities for feeding and mating, giving cold-adapted beetles reproductive advantages that compound over multiple generations. Others inherit improved heat tolerance, allowing them to remain active during the hottest parts of summer when competitors are forced to seek shelter. These beetles can exploit resources and territories that become temporarily available when other species are inactive, gaining access to food and mates with reduced competition. The forest floor ecosystem becomes increasingly complex as new species colonize the area and existing ones adapt to changing conditions. Your beetle descendants must navigate this complexity, finding their niche among competing demands for space, food, and mates. Success requires not just individual fitness, but also the ability to function within intricate ecological relationships. Genetic diversity within your lineages provides the raw material for continued adaptation. Some descendants carry genes that will prove advantageous under future environmental conditions that haven't occurred yet. Others maintain genetic variations that seem neutral now, but could become critically important if circumstances change. The underground world where your life began continues to harbor developing beetles, each generation learning the same basic lessons about growth, competition, and survival. But the specific challenges they'll face upon emergence are constantly evolving, requiring continuous adaptation and genetic innovation. Your story becomes part of the larger narrative of forest evolution, a single chapter in an ongoing book written by millions of individual lives. Each beetle that emerges from rotting wood carries forward some portion of the genetic wisdom accumulated over countless generations of survival, adaptation, and reproduction. The cycles continue: birth, growth, emergence, competition, mating, death. But within these constants, endless variation creates the diversity that allows beetle populations to persist through changing environmental conditions. Your contributions to this genetic pool help ensure that future generations will have the tools necessary for whatever challenges await them. In the end, your individual existence matters, not because it was unique, but because it was part of something larger and more enduring than any single life. The forest that shaped you continues to shape your descendants, and they in turn shape the forest through their choices, their successes, and their failures. The rotting logs that gave you life eventually disappear, but new ones take their place. The territory you defended becomes someone else's domain, but the patterns of competition and cooperation you participated in persist. Your mates find new partners, but the genetic combinations you created continue to influence beetle evolution. Life as a Hercules beetle ends, but the life of Hercules beetles continues. Your story becomes part of their story, your adaptations part of their toolkit for survival, your genetic legacy part of their ongoing relationship with the forest ecosystem that created and sustains you all. The forest remembers nothing of individual beetles, but it carries the accumulated wisdom of every generation in the genes of those who survive. Your brief emergence into sunlight, your struggles and triumphs, Your mating successes and territorial battles all contribute to the genetic library that future beetles will draw upon as they face their own challenges. And somewhere in the darkness, beneath a rotting log, new grubs are beginning their own journey toward the surface, carrying within their developing bodies the potential for stories as complex and meaningful as yours. The cycle continues, as it always has, as it always will, each individual life both temporary and eternal in its contributions to the ongoing saga of survival. The forest floor beneath you crackles with the first hints of dawn as you make what will be your final foraging run. Your movements are deliberate now, each step calculated to conserve energy that's becoming increasingly precious. The log you've been working on for weeks is nearly exhausted, its soft interior stripped clean by your relentless feeding. You're not alone in this desperate search for sustenance. Other beetles, many showing the same signs of wear and declining vitality that mark your own condition, compete for the dwindling resources. A female approaches the same rotting stump you've been eyeing. She's smaller than you, but moves with the efficient purpose of someone who's learned to make every calorie count. Instead of the aggressive territorial display that would have been automatic in your prime, you simply watch her work. There's enough decay here for both of you, and the energy cost of fighting no longer justifies the potential reward. She seems to reach the same conclusion, feeding on one side of the stump while you take the other. This peaceful coexistence would have been unthinkable during your first summer on the surface. Back then, every resource was worth defending, every competitor a threat to be eliminated. Now you understand that survival sometimes requires cooperation, even among species members who would normally compete. Your mandibles work methodically through the soft wood, but you notice the effort required is greater than it used to be. The powerful muscles that once crushed opponents and carved through the toughest timber now strain against material that should yield easily. Age is taking its toll in ways both obvious and subtle. The female finishes her feeding and approaches your side of the stump. For a moment, you tense, expecting competition. Instead, she begins working on a section of wood that's too hard for your weakened mandibles to penetrate effectively. Her technique is different from yours, more precise, using leverage rather than brute force to access the nutrients within. You watch her method with interest. Even at this late stage of your life, there are still things to learn. She notices your attention and doesn't retreat, continuing her work while you observe. It's a small lesson in efficiency that might help you extract more nutrition from increasingly scarce resources. The sun climbs higher, and the temperature begins to rise beyond comfortable levels. Your heat tolerance isn't what it used to be, and you find yourself seeking shade earlier in the day than you once did. The female has already disappeared, probably to her own shelter, leaving you alone with the partially consumed stump. You continue feeding until the heat becomes unbearable, then retreat to a crevice between two large rocks. The space is barely large enough for your bulk, but it provides the cooling shade your aging body requires. You settle in for what's become a necessary midday rest period. Sleep comes easily now, but it's different from the brief recovery periods of your youth. These rest sessions are deeper, more necessary, and harder to wake from. Your body is spending more time in low-energy states, conserving resources for the essential functions that keep you alive. Dreams visit you during these extended rests, not the vivid fantasies of your hibernation periods, but quieter memories of successful hunts, satisfying meals, and moments of simple contentment. Your subconscious seems to be cataloging the experiences that defined your existence, creating a mental archive of your time on the surface. You wake to the sound of rain beginning to fall. The gentle patter against the rocks above your shelter is soothing, and you realize how much you've missed the sound. Rain means softer wood, easier digging, and potentially new food sources, as organic matter begins to decompose more rapidly in the increased moisture. But rain also means greater difficulty moving around. Your aging joints struggle more in cold, damp conditions, and the wet ground makes finding secure footing challenging. You decide to remain in your shelter until the weather improves, using the time to rest and digest your recent meal. The rain continues for hours, creating a steady rhythm that seems to slow your heart rate and deepen your breathing. You're entering a state that's not quite hibernation, but isn't normal activity either, a kind of temporary dormancy that helps preserve energy during unfavorable conditions. When you finally emerge, the forest looks refreshed and renewed. The rain has washed dust from leaves, filled small depressions with clean water, and created the kind of humidity that accelerates decay in fallen wood. The air carries rich scents of organic decomposition that make your antennae twitch with interest. You discover that the stump you were working on earlier has been transformed by the moisture. Sections that were too hard to penetrate before are now soft enough to access, and new areas of decay have opened up. It's like finding a completely new food source in a familiar location. Other insects have noticed the same opportunity. The rain has brought out species you haven't seen in weeks, all drawn by the improved feeding conditions. Competition is more intense now, but it's also more civilized. Everyone seems to understand that the abundance is temporary and worth sharing rather than fighting over. You feed steadily through the afternoon, taking advantage of the improved conditions to build up energy reserves. Your body responds positively to the high-quality nutrition, and for a few hours, you almost feel like your younger self. The pain in your joints lessens, your movements become more fluid, and your appetite increases dramatically. But the improvement is temporary. As evening approaches and the effects of the good meal begin to fade, the familiar aches and limitations return. Your brief return to vitality serves mainly to remind you of how much you've declined from your peak condition. A younger male arrives at your feeding site as darkness begins to fall. He's impressive, large, unmarked by battle scars, moving with the confident aggression of someone who's never lost a significant fight. Everything about his posture suggests he intends to claim this resource for himself. You consider your options. Fighting is possible but risky. You might win through experience and technique, but you might also suffer injuries that would be difficult to recover from at your age. Retreating is safer, but means losing access to this valuable food source when you need it most. The young male makes the decision for you by charging without warning. His horn collides with yours with tremendous force, but instead of the solid impact you expect, you feel yourself being pushed backward. Your legs scramble for purchase on the wet ground, but you can't generate enough leverage to hold your position. The fight is over almost before it begins. You find yourself flipped onto your back, legs waving helplessly in the air, while the younger Beetle stands over you in triumph. The humiliation stings more than any physical injury, but there's also a strange sense of relief. The burden of defending territory and resources has been lifted from your shoulders. You struggle to right yourself, a process that takes much longer than it should. The young male has already claimed the stump and begun feeding, but he doesn't prevent you from accessing a smaller section of rotting wood nearby. It's not charity, just the practical recognition that you're no longer a significant threat to his dominance. You feed on the marginal scraps he's left behind, finding them adequate for your reduced needs. The wood is softer than what you've been eating, easier to digest, and surprisingly nutritious. Sometimes the resources others overlook turn out to be perfectly suitable for different circumstances. The young male finishes his meal and disappears into the darkness, probably to establish his claim over other prime feeding sites in the area. You remain at the stump, working methodically through the remaining edible sections. There's no hurry now, no territorial boundaries to patrol, no competitors to intimidate, no complex social dynamics to navigate. This new phase of your existence is simpler in some ways. Your needs are reduced, your expectations lowered, your energy focused entirely on the basic requirements of survival. The competitive pressures that once drove your behavior have been replaced by a more fundamental concern with maintaining life itself. You work through the night, taking frequent rest breaks, but making steady progress through the available food. Your feeding technique has become more efficient out of necessity. You can't afford to waste energy on ineffective approaches. Every bite must count toward extending your survival. Dawn arrives with clear skies and warming temperatures. The combination of a good meal and favorable weather conditions gives you energy you haven't felt in weeks. You decide to explore beyond your immediate area, searching for additional food sources while your strength allows. The journey takes you through sections of forest you haven't visited in months. Some areas have changed dramatically. Storms have brought down new trees, creating fresh opportunities for wood-boring insects. Other locations remain much as you remember them, familiar landmarks in a slowly evolving landscape. You encounter several other beetles during your exploration, most of them younger and stronger than yourself. But you also notice a few individuals who show signs of similar aging, movements that are slightly slower, exoskeletons that are more scratched and worn, behaviors that prioritize efficiency over dominance. These encounters are brief and peaceful. None of you poses a significant threat to the others, and the forest is large enough to accommodate multiple beetles with reduced territorial demands. There's an unspoken understanding among aging individuals that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than competition. You discover a partially hollow log that's been colonized by the right kinds of fungi to make the wood particularly digestible. It's not a resource that would have attracted you during your prime. The wood is too soft, too processed by decomposer organisms to provide the challenging feeding that once satisfied you. But for your current needs, it's perfect. The log becomes your new primary food source. You establish a routine of feeding in the early morning and late evening, resting during the heat of the day and the coldest part of the night. It's a simple schedule that maximizes your energy intake while minimizing unnecessary expenditure. Other insects visit the log regularly, but most are smaller species that don't compete directly with you for resources. You develop a tolerance for their presence that would have been impossible during your territorial phase. They're part of the ecosystem you depend on, breaking down organic matter and creating the conditions that make your own feeding possible. Weeks pass in this peaceful routine. Your condition stabilizes, not improving, but not declining as rapidly as before. The consistent nutrition and reduced stress seem to be extending your functional lifespan, giving you time to experience aspects of forest life you were too busy to notice during your competitive years. You become more aware of seasonal changes, subtle shifts in temperature and daylight that signal the approach of your third winter. The signs are familiar now, but they carry new meaning. This hibernation will be different from the previous ones. You're starting from a position of greater weakness, with fewer reserves to sustain you through the cold months. You begin preparing earlier than usual, seeking out the most protected shelter you can find and working to build up whatever energy stores your aging body can accumulate. Every decision is weighted against the coming challenge of surviving another winter in your deteriorated condition. The shelter you select is smaller than your previous hibernation sites, but offers better insulation and protection from the elements. It's a narrow crevice in a large boulder, lined with accumulated organic matter that will provide some insulation against the cold. You spend days arranging the space for maximum warmth retention. As the first frost approaches, you make your final preparations. Your body has already begun the metabolic changes that will sustain you through hibernation, but the process feels different this time, more precarious, less certain. You're asking biological systems that are already strained to perform one more time at the edge of their capabilities. You enter the shelter as snow begins to fall, settling into position for what you sense may be your final winter. Your body follows familiar patterns of shutdown and resource conservation, but every system operates closer to its limits than ever before. The margin between survival and death has narrowed to almost nothing. Consciousness fades gradually as hibernation takes hold. Your last clear thought is not of fear or regret, but of quiet satisfaction. You've lived fully within the constraints biology imposed on you, experienced everything your species offers, and contributed your genetic legacy to future generations. Whatever happens now, your story is complete. The winter deepens around your shelter, but you're no longer aware of external conditions. Your body maintains its essential functions through increasingly tenuous biological processes, drawing on reserves that diminish with each passing day. The cold penetrates deeper than your insulation can resist, challenging your survival mechanisms in ways they've never been tested. Time becomes meaningless in the hibernation state. Your body exists in a twilight zone between life and death, sustained by evolutionary adaptations refined over millions of years, but operating now at the very edge of their effectiveness. Each day survived is a victory against increasingly impossible odds. Your dreams, when they come, are peaceful, memories of sunlight filtering through forest canopy, the satisfactions of successful hunts, the complex chemistry of courtship encounters. Your subconscious processes the experiences that defined your existence, creating a final archive of your time in the surface world. Spring arrives late, and your body's attempt to wake from hibernation is sluggish and incomplete. The biological signals that should trigger emergence are weak, filtered through systems that have been pushed beyond their design limits. You exist in a state between sleeping and waking, neither fully dormant nor completely active. The snow around your shelter melts, but you don't emerge to investigate the changing conditions. Your body has reached the point where hibernation and death have become indistinguishable states, biological processes winding down to their final stopping point. The margin of survival has finally been exceeded. Your breathing becomes irregular, then stops entirely. Your heart, which has beaten faithfully through 3 seasons of surface life and multiple hibernations, grows still. The chemical processes that sustained your consciousness cease one by one, and your individual story comes to its natural conclusion. But the story of your genetic legacy continues in ways you never witnessed. Somewhere in the forest, beetles carrying your DNA are emerging from their own underground development, beginning their own journeys through the complex challenges of surface life. They face a world that's both familiar and changed, equipped with genetic tools shaped by your experiences and those of countless previous generations. The forest ecosystem continues its eternal cycles, indifferent to individual deaths, but dependent on the collective contributions of all its inhabitants. Your body becomes part of the organic matter that will nourish future generations of trees, insects, and countless other forms of life. Your life was both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary in that you followed the same basic patterns as millions of other beetles. Extraordinary in that no other individual will ever replicate exactly your combination of experiences, choices, and genetic contributions. You were simultaneously insignificant and irreplaceable in the grand scheme of forest evolution. The shelter where you spent your final winter becomes home to other creatures seeking protection from the elements. A family of smaller beetles discovers the space and uses it for their own hibernation. Spiders weave webs across openings you once used for ventilation. Nothing in the forest remains unused for long. Your genetic material spreads through beetle populations in ways that create new possibilities for survival and adaptation. Some of your descendants inherit your size and strength, others your ability to survive harsh conditions or find food in unlikely places. A few combine traits in novel ways that prepare them for environmental challenges that haven't occurred yet. The rotting logs that sustained your adult life eventually disappear, consumed by insects and broken down by weather. But new trees fall each season, creating fresh opportunities for the beetles that carry your genetic legacy. The specific resources change, but the fundamental relationships between beetles and their forest ecosystem remain constant. Life as a Hercules beetle might seem rough, but there's another animal out there that has it way worse. Trust me, it's wild. Check out the video and see for yourself. Your third winter begins like the others, but your body knows this one is different. The hibernation process starts normally. Your metabolism slows, your breathing becomes shallow, your heart rate drops to conserve energy. But the biological systems that have carried you through 2 previous winters are operating on borrowed time now. Deep in your boulder crevice, surrounded by insulating organic matter, you drift between consciousness and dormancy. Your dreams are quieter now, less about epic battles and more about simple moments. The taste of perfectly rotted wood, the warmth of sunlight on your shell, the satisfaction of a successful molt years ago in your underground world. Your body draws on fat reserves that are smaller than they've ever been. Muscle tissue gets metabolized to keep essential organs functioning. Your exoskeleton, once gleaming and powerful, becomes a hollow shell protecting increasingly fragile internal systems. You're burning yourself to stay alive, and the fuel is running dangerously low. The cold outside penetrates deeper than your shelter can resist. Your body temperature drops below the threshold where normal hibernation can sustain life. But somehow, your systems keep functioning, barely, precariously, but enough to maintain the spark of existence through the darkest months. When spring finally arrives, your emergence is nothing like the triumphant breakouts of previous years. You don't burst from your shelter, ready to reclaim territory and find mates. Instead, you crawl slowly into the warming air, your movements uncertain and painful. Every step requires conscious effort that once came automatically. The forest has changed during your absence. Familiar landmarks have shifted. Storms brought down trees you remember, opened clearings where dense canopy once filtered the light. New growth has sprouted from rotting logs you once fed on. The world keeps evolving while individual beetles come and go. You discover that your digestive system has become more sensitive during hibernation. Foods that once nourished you now cause discomfort. Your mandibles, weakened by months of disuse, struggle with even the softest wood. You're forced to seek out increasingly processed organic matter, wood that's been pre-digested by fungi and bacteria. Other beetles in the area treat you differently now. The aggressive challenges that once marked territorial encounters are replaced by cautious avoidance. You're no longer seen as a competitor worth fighting. Your condition makes it obvious that you pose no threat to younger, stronger individuals. This change in social status brings unexpected benefits. You can approach food sources without triggering defensive responses. Younger beetles might chase each other away from prime feeding spots, but they ignore your presence entirely. You've become invisible in the competition hierarchy, which paradoxically gives you access to resources you couldn't claim through strength. You develop new feeding strategies suited to your limitations. Instead of attacking the hardest sections of rotting wood, you focus on areas where other insects have already done the difficult work of initial breakdown. You follow ant trails to discover sources of organic matter you might otherwise miss. You learn to exploit the waste products of other species' feeding activities. Your territory shrinks to a small area around a single fallen log that provides everything you need: food, shelter, and protection from predators. You no longer patrol boundaries or defend resources from competitors. Your world has contracted to the essentials of immediate survival, but within those constraints, you find a kind of peace you never experienced during your competitive years. The rhythm of your days becomes simpler and more predictable. You feed during the coolest parts of the morning and evening, rest during temperature extremes, and spend the middle hours of each day in a state that's neither fully awake nor completely asleep. Your body has learned to conserve energy in ways you never needed before. You notice details of forest life that escaped your attention during busier times. The patterns of light and shadow that shift throughout the day. The subtle changes in air pressure that precede weather changes. The complex network of sounds that different insects make to communicate with each other. Age has brought a kind of awareness that youth's urgency made impossible. Summer progresses with fewer dramatic events than you remember from previous years. No territorial battles, no intense courtship encounters, no dangerous confrontations with predators. Your days are quiet, focused entirely on the basic maintenance of life. But there's dignity in this simplicity, a completion of the cycle that began when you first emerged from underground darkness. You encounter other aging beetles occasionally, individuals who've survived long enough to reach the same state of decline you're experiencing. These meetings are peaceful, marked by mutual recognition rather than competition. You share resources without conflict, understanding that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than fighting over scraps. One evening, while feeding on a section of particularly soft bark, you're approached by a young female. She's magnificent, large, healthy, with an exoskeleton that gleams in the fading light. For a moment, old instincts stir, remnants of the drive that once dominated your behavior. But your body can't respond to these impulses anymore. She investigates your feeding site with professional interest, evaluating the quality of the available food. When she determines it meets her standards, she begins feeding nearby without any of the complex courtship behaviors that would have accompanied such an encounter in your prime. You're simply another aging beetle, no longer relevant to her reproductive agenda. The interaction is brief and businesslike. She feeds efficiently, takes what she needs, and disappears into the forest to continue her search for suitable mates and territories. You remain at the feeding site, working methodically through the remaining edible material. The encounter reminds you of how completely your role in beetle society has changed. As autumn approaches, you begin preparing for what you sense will be your final winter. The preparations are different this time, less about building energy reserves and more about finding the most protected shelter possible. Your body's ability to survive hibernation has been compromised by 3 years of surface life, and you need every advantage you can get. You select a deep crack in a large granite boulder, a space barely wide enough for your body, but offering maximum protection from wind and temperature fluctuations. You line the interior with the finest organic matter you can find, creating insulation that might make the difference between survival and death during the coldest months. The process of entering hibernation is more difficult than ever before. Your body's natural responses are sluggish, and the metabolic changes that should prepare you for winter dormancy occur slowly and incompletely. You settle into your shelter knowing that your margin for survival has shrunk to almost nothing. Your final conscious thoughts aren't about fear or regret. Instead, you experience a kind of satisfaction that comes from having lived fully within the constraints your biology imposed. You've experienced everything your species offers: the underground world of growth and development, the surface world of competition and reproduction, the gradual decline that comes with age and accumulated wear. As hibernation takes hold, your consciousness fades gradually. Your breathing slows to the minimum rate that can sustain life. Your heart beats just often enough to circulate the blood your organs need to survive. Your body temperature drops to match the environment around you, reducing metabolic demands to their absolute minimum. The winter deepens, and your shelter becomes buried under layers of snow and ice. You exist in a state between life and death, maintained by biological processes that are themselves slowly failing. Each day survived is a victory against increasingly impossible odds, but the victories are becoming smaller and less frequent. Your dreams during this final hibernation are peaceful, memories of successful hunts, satisfying meals, moments of simple contentment in the forest environment that shaped your entire adult existence. Your subconscious processes the experiences that defined your identity, creating a final archive of your time in the surface world. Time becomes meaningless in the hibernation state. Days pass without awareness. Weeks blend together in unconscious dormancy. Your body draws on reserves that diminish steadily, metabolizing muscle and fat to maintain the minimal functions necessary for survival. The process continues as long as biology allows, but it cannot continue indefinitely. Spring arrives, but your body's response to warming temperatures is weak and incomplete. The signals that should trigger emergence from hibernation are filtered through systems that have been pushed beyond their limits. You exist in a twilight state between dormancy and death, biological processes winding down toward their inevitable conclusion. Your breathing becomes irregular, then stops entirely. Your heart, which has beaten faithfully through 3 seasons of surface life and multiple hibernations, finally grows still. The chemical processes that sustained your consciousness cease one by one, and your individual story reaches its natural end. But your legacy continues in ways you could never have imagined. The genetic material you contributed to the beetle population carries forward adaptations refined by your experiences and those of countless previous generations. Your descendants face challenges you never encountered, equipped with tools shaped by your survival and success. The forest ecosystem continues its eternal cycles, incorporating your remains into the organic processes that sustain countless other forms of life. Your exoskeleton becomes calcium for growing plants. Your tissues provide nitrogen for decomposer organisms. Even in death, you contribute to the complex web of relationships that define forest ecology. The boulder where you spent your final winter becomes a landmark of sorts, though the forest doesn't mourn individual beetles. Your shelter is discovered by a small spider who finds the protected crevice perfect for her own needs. She weaves webs across the entrance, catching tiny flies and gnats. Life moves on, using what came before as foundation for what comes next. Your genetic contributions spread through the beetle population in unexpected ways. One of your great-grandsons develops an unusual tolerance for colder temperatures, allowing him to remain active later into autumn than his competitors. This advantage proves crucial during a particularly harsh winter that kills off many of his rivals. His bloodline thrives while others disappear. A great-granddaughter inherits your exceptional ability to detect the richest food sources. Her enhanced chemical sensors allow her to locate rotting logs with the perfect balance of moisture and nutrients. She grows larger and stronger than most females, attracting the attention of multiple males and producing numerous offspring who carry this advantageous trait forward. The forest itself is evolving around your descendants. Climate patterns shift in ways that make traditional hibernation sites less reliable. Some winters bring ice storms that shatter tree branches and create new feeding opportunities. Other years see droughts that accelerate the decay of fallen timber. Your genetic legacy provides the raw material for adaptation to these changing conditions. Human activity introduces new variables into the ecosystem. A hiking trail cuts through part of the forest, bringing foot traffic that compacts soil and alters drainage patterns. Some of your descendants learn to exploit the edge habitats created by this disturbance, finding opportunities in the transition zones between developed and wild areas. Disease sweeps through the beetle population periodically, killing individuals who lack immunity to specific pathogens. Your descendants who inherited robust immune systems survive these epidemics while others perish. The genetic diversity you contributed helps ensure that some lineages persist through these biological challenges. A distant descendant develops an unusual relationship with wood-boring grubs of a different species. Instead of competing for the same resources, she learns to follow their tunnels and feed on the wood chips and waste they leave behind. This cooperation allows both species to extract more nutrition from limited food sources. The rotting logs that sustained your generation gradually disappear, consumed by insects and decomposed by weather. But new trees fall each season, creating fresh opportunities for wood-boring beetles. Your descendants must adapt to feeding on different tree species as the forest composition changes over time. Some genetic lineages develop enhanced sensory capabilities that allow them to detect predators from greater distances. Others inherit improved defensive behaviors, learning to freeze at precisely the right moment to avoid detection by hunting birds. These survival traits spread through the population as their advantages become apparent. Environmental pressures favor beetles with more efficient digestive systems. Your descendants, who can extract maximum nutrition from poor quality food sources, have significant advantages during lean periods. These metabolic improvements become more common in the population as natural selection rewards efficiency over raw power. The underground world where your life began continues to harbor developing beetles, each generation facing the same fundamental challenges of growth and survival in confined spaces. But the specific conditions they encounter are constantly changing as soil chemistry and fungal communities evolve in response to environmental pressures. Your story becomes part of the genetic memory carried by every beetle that emerges from rotting wood. The adaptations you developed, the challenges you overcame, the strategies you employed, all contribute to the collective wisdom encoded in beetle DNA. Future generations draw on this inherited knowledge as they face their own struggles for survival. The forest remembers nothing of individual beetles, but it carries the accumulated experience of every generation in the genes of those who persist. Your brief time in the sunlight, your battles and victories, your moments of quiet satisfaction all become part of the ongoing narrative of beetle evolution. The cycles continue, indifferent to individual stories, but shaped by their collective impact. New grubs are already chewing through the rotting timber where your journey began, their mandibles carving tunnels that will become highways for the next generation. They don't know about you, don't carry conscious memories of your struggles, but they carry something more valuable, the genetic instructions refined by millions of years of beetles just like you. Your descendants face a forest that's subtly different from the one you knew. Climate shifts bring warmer winters that confuse hibernation cycles, forcing some beetles to burn through energy reserves when they should be dormant. Others adapt by developing more flexible metabolisms, able to switch between active and dormant states as conditions demand. The human world encroaches in ways you never witnessed. Light pollution from distant cities disrupts the natural rhythms that once guided beetle behavior. Some of your genetic lineages learn to navigate by different cues, chemical gradients, magnetic fields, the subtle vibrations that travel through soil and wood. Evolution doesn't pause for human convenience. New predators arrive in the forest ecosystem, introduce species that don't follow the rules your ancestors learned over countless generations. Your descendants must develop fresh defensive strategies, chemical signals that warn of unfamiliar threats, behaviors that work against hunters with different tactics and preferences. But life persists because that's what life does. It adapts, overcomes, finds ways to thrive in conditions that would have destroyed previous generations. The genetic diversity you contributed helps ensure that some beetles survive whatever challenges emerge. Your story becomes part of their story, your adaptations part of their toolkit. The forest floor where you once battled for territory now hosts beetles that have learned different approaches to competition. Some avoid direct confrontation entirely, timing their activities to minimize encounters with rivals. Others develop cooperative behaviors, sharing information about food sources and predator locations through chemical communication networks. Your legacy isn't measured in monuments or memories. Beetles don't build statues or write histories. It's measured in survival, in the persistence of genetic combinations that prove their worth through the ultimate test of natural selection. Every beetle that emerges from rotting wood carries forward some fragment of the wisdom encoded in your DNA. The underground world continues its ancient rhythms, larvae growing and molting in the darkness, preparing for their own emergence into a surface world that will challenge them in ways they can't imagine. Some will thrive, others will perish, but all will contribute to the ongoing experiment of beetle existence. Your individual story ends, but the story of beetles continues. Each generation builds on the lessons learned by those who came before, adding their own discoveries to the genetic library that defines what it means to be a Hercules beetle. The forest that shaped you continues to shape them, and they in turn shape the forest through their choices, their successes, and their failures. The cycle is complete, but it never truly ends. Somewhere in the darkness, beneath fallen timber, your genetic legacy stirs in developing grubs that will soon begin their own journeys from birth to death. They carry within their cells the potential for stories as complex and meaningful as yours, each one a unique thread in the endless tapestry of survival. Life as a Hercules beetle might be rough, but that's what makes it remarkable. Every moment of your existence was earned through competition, defended against threats, and maintained through constant vigilance. You lived fully within the constraints biology imposed, experienced everything your species offers, and passed on the tools future generations will need to write their own stories of triumph and survival. The forest remembers none of this consciously, but it remembers everything that matters. Your struggles, your victories, your quiet moments of satisfaction all become part of the accumulated wisdom that guides beetle evolution. The dead wood that gave you life returns to soil. The soil nourishes new trees, and new trees eventually fall to become food for beetles yet to be born. And that's the real victory, not individual survival, but the continuation of the cycle itself. You are part of something larger and more enduring than any single life, a process that began millions of years ago and will continue long after the last human has forgotten that beetles ever existed. Your story ends, but the story never ends. Here you can find the next video. Until then, see you soon.